OnTheHorn.com.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to News Talk Tonight. I'm Dave Moore. With me, thank God, is Brian Lee.
Hi, everybody. We're about ready to batten down the hatches here at the studio. We might even make it through this broadcast.
We're hoping, because the worst of the storm apparently is on its way. And last I knew, the studio doesn't do a whole lot of good in bad weather.
Not the last two times we've had it.
No. Nonetheless, we're going to power through. And
Yes.
among other things, we're going to be talking about how job losses point to a slow recovery in Connecticut. The linemen at CLMP are sounding the staffing alarm bell. Good thing to know when it's 20 to 40 mile an hour winds outside.
Love it.
It's tied again in Windsor. Yes, that's right. The primary that never ends isn't ending yet. And there was a question about whether or not certain a gross receipts tax might apply to cosmetics, appliances, you name it, because the stuff has petroleum in it. And, of course, petroleum products are subject to the gross receipts tax. Apparently, Senator Kevin Whitkos brought up that possibility, and Kevin Sullivan, the Department of Revenue Services Commissioner, kind of sort of put the body slam on him for that one. Speaking of body slam, did you know that the WWE has been taking down some of their edgier videos? The stuff from the early 80s and some of the early 90s. And apparently the Democrats thought it would be kind of cute to put it back up again. And so the WWE took it back down.
So is this on their website? Is this on YouTube? Oh, fantastic.
And apparently the lawyers from WWE contacted YouTube and said, "Thou shalt take it down."
So no matter what, it has to stay down.
That depends on whether or not someone else loads it up. But, you know.
Got it. So it could be up there for a little bit of time, just enough for you to see something risque here in this election year. I like it.
Yeah, you know, and the picture that was on CT News Junkie was a Thomas McMillan file fit video photo. I'll show it to you. Yeah, it's 4 babes in the ring.
If you hand that to me, I can actually tell you who the babes are.
Relatively tame picture, but you knew based on some of the stuff that was happening in the early 80s.
Oh, actually, I only know 2 of them.
Oh, darn.
I have no idea who the one chick is. Gail Kim is one of them.
Okay.
She's still wrestling.
Wow.
Yeah, this is actually incredibly tame. And they've got so much clothes on compared to now. If that's something that they're worried about costing votes, they're crazy.
Yeah, well. And then there's the candidate herself, who is having to distance herself from comments that were publicized the other day. And of course, all the Democratic squawk boxes were playing it to the hilt, and all of the Republican squawk boxes were basically saying, "So what? He's right." And if you didn't hear about it, it basically the Republican candidate for president, Mitt Romney, former governor of Massachusetts, had made a statement that 47% of the electorate don't pay taxes, are on government entitlement plans, and therefore will not vote for him, so he's not going to try to reach out to them. Oops. Just so that we are official, News Talk Tonight is brought to you by Amazon.com, Gateway Financial Group, Sandits Travel, Sherper Technologies, Budwitz, and Meyerjack CPAs, Deepwater Seafood of Avon, and Central... Let's try that
Try it again.
Central CT Dental. There we go. .com. All right. Job losses point to a slow recovery. Now, all of the news that I am imparting to our listeners, wow, there's a few of them, come from ctnewsjunkie.com. This particular story by Christine Stewart after losing 4,000 jobs in the second quarter of the year, a University of Connecticut economist is predicting that the state won't fully recover from the recession until 2018. That's 6 years from now.
Which sector are these jobs lost in?
It's overall.
Okay.
And there's more on that. In the latest edition of the Connecticut Economy, easy for you to say, economist and editor Steve Lanza opined that it will take 6 years to recover from the current recession if the state keeps adding about 2,000 jobs per quarter. That's the overall average, including the 4,000 lost in the second quarter. Connecticut has been averaging adding jobs at a rate of about 5,000 quarterly, Lanza said, admitting that the recent second quarter job loss could just be an awkward stumble in the state's race to regain jobs. He said two traditionally seasonal sectors of the economy, construction and retail trade, hired early thanks to the unusually warm weather that begins typically the spring hiring. And as such, the spring hiring surge never really occurred because they'd been hiring in the first quarter.
Mm-hmm.
As of July, retailers continued to add jobs at a fairly brisk pace, but hiring cuts at bars and restaurants suggest that households may be paring back in some areas of discretionary spending. Other major sectors, such as manufacturing, professional and business services, and government, underperformed in the quarter, posting either anemic gains or relatively steep losses, but education and finance did better than average for the recovery. Said Lanza, Connecticut has, until this last quarter, enjoyed a more robust recovery this time around than after the last two recessions. At the current rate, it will take nearly 6 more years to recover all the jobs lost in the last recession. And we may not even be that lucky. Economists expect tepid gross domestic product growth as far as the eye can see, which would translate into exceedingly sluggish job gains in the coming quarters, said Lanza. With growth so low, we shouldn't have expected much in the way of new Connecticut jobs, 2,000 or so, perhaps, said Lanza. Taken as a whole, the current economic outlook for Connecticut raises only a minor threat of additional near-term job losses, but with the economic activity likely to remain unconventionally restrained, don't expect this lemon-lime unrecovery to give way to the Kohler-flavored real thing anytime soon.
Wow.
An economist being slightly funny?
Bouncing stuff around like that? Going
Wow.
Lyman and Coke?
Yeah. Now, the reason that I bring this up, because, this tends to be more of a politically oriented news show, is that the economy plays a huge role as far as independent voting is concerned,
mm-hmm.
and as far as some of the more moderate Republican and Democratic folks are.
For the 4 of them on each side.
I was going to say, you know who you are.
You're probably listening to this right now.
Maybe. Thereabouts.
I'm not wacko enough to cover anything on the far extreme to either side, and I'm fairly certain you aren't either. So
No, I try to be middle of the road. Like to think that I'm close to the middle of the road at least. Oh, by the way, last week we had been talking about the potential for debates in the Connecticut senatorial race, which we'll touch on in a little bit. Don't worry, we'll get to that. Apparently, 4 debates between Linda McMahon and Representative Christopher Murphy have been agreed to. It's just they haven't been scheduled. Folks, just so you know,
tick,
there's 50 days left. If you're going to get 4 in, you better start now.
I'd be happy with 2. I'd be happy with 1.
I'd be happy with 2.
I'd be happy with 1. Just give me some random Thursday night.
I
close.
would be ecstatic with 3 because then you couldn't say,
I don't
the
think they've got
first
enough
one was
time.
a... Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but I'm just saying you couldn't put the first one off as a fluke and then go
Right.
to the second one and say, you'd have 3 to actually chew on.
Having done some
seeing
political
that's happening.
science stuff when I was in school, because that kind of was my major, what they taught me back then was if you ever have the opportunity to listen to the debate as opposed to watch the debate,
Yep.
you have a different idea of who actually won
Absolutely.
on everything. So I try and listen to them now as often as I can.
One of the classic examples,
Kennedy-Nixon,
exactly.
the first debate.
Because
Sweating
Nixon
like a pig.
sounded fantastic.
He
He
was
was
sick.
on point.
He was sick.
Right.
He was sweating. He had a white shirt on. He was washed
He had
out.
a 5 o'clock shadow.
Oh, it was terrible. Yeah.
And and the folks who were listening on the radio thought that it was at least even,
Yep.
if not Nixon winning.
And the
Everybody
picture,
who watched on TV,
Kennedy had that little bit of tan that he got.
Oh, yeah.
He had a light blue shirt on, which on television, which was brand new at the time, amazing, absolutely amazing the difference.
you can see Dave in a white shirt. Okay, it makes me a little more flushed
Yeah,
on camera.
especially under the light. You've got two fluorescents over you,
Yep,
so it's clearly going to wash you out.
you are looking human.
Dapper.
Absolutely. But as we were saying, the economy is playing a role as far as who's going to be excited enough to get out to the ballot box this time around.
Mhm.
And the economy is going to play a much bigger role, especially for the under tickets, than for the presidential ballot. Because, as you were saying earlier, a lot of folks have already made up their mind at
Yeah.
this point in time, including the independent and or unaffiliated voter.
Yep.
So it's almost safe to say, as far as the presidential campaign is concerned, it's all over but the shouting. And there are signs that, national polls notwithstanding, that it's still kind of sort of fluid as far as voters who are likely to vote being polled are concerned. Still, the president has a lead that is beyond the margin of error.
Yep.
It ain't comfortable yet, but it's showing a certain level of solidity. You are not seeing that with the under tickets.
I'm fascinated with this Murphy McMahon thing. I really am. I'm absolutely fascinated by it because I don't even know what I don't know what they're at. I don't look at the numbers. I just want to.
Oh, yeah.
I want to see them. I just want to see them at the podium, going after each other, and I just want to hear. I want to hear the trade of ideas as opposed to the bickering that we're seeing through commercials. I just want to see them.
Sure.
Show me, both of you. Show me what you've got.
What's your job plan?
Yeah.
What are you going to do about working with the other side? How are you going to break the logjam that exists
That's
right now?
the biggest problem right now, and we all know it. That's the biggest problem.
And you know that if you had somebody who actually had some semblance of what they were doing, for instance, and this is not a plug for our friend, but I would love to see Christine Stewart be a moderator for a debate because she's already got a lot of the background stuff,
Mhm.
okay? And she knows how to be objective, so she's not going to be favoring one side or the other.
Yep.
You're not seeing that so much with, for instance, anytime Fox has got something going.
No.
Okay? You're not going to see that even with the NBC stuff.
On MS, you're not going to see it.
No. And I'm talking about big NBC.
Right.
Not just MS.
Oh, sure.
And for Connecticut, you've got political reporters who generally know what they're doing, but they're not going to have the gravitas to cut someone off and say, no, that's not the question. That's not what was asked. Could you please answer the question?
That's why I love seeing Jim Lair host,
Oh, yeah.
because him and the guy that used to do Meet the Press, Tim.
Yep.
Tim Russert, who we truly all miss. If you got up every single week and watched the show, we truly miss him. I love to see people
Not
like that.
just because it's
hosting.
David Gregory, but it's just
No,
he
he was
was
the master. It was he took something that was a show that had gone basically the
It was
way of the
moribund.
dinosaur. It was
Yeah.
horrible, and he turned it into something that it was almost like appointment TV for me. I got up every single week to watch what Russert would say and do and who he'd have on, and the fact that he would get the truth out of them.
it
was
became
amazing to me.
the political 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
Wrong
Without
channel.
question.
Get that, but
yeah, without
it
question.
was he was the only person who really would call someone out and
Yep.
say, Senator, that's not what you said 4 months ago.
Here, I've got it.
And this, you could watch the color drain.
And the best part was, Republicans thought he was a Democrat, and Democrats thought he was a Republican,
Yep.
which means he did
He
his
was an
job.
equal opportunity offender.
And Lair is the same way.
Yep.
Or was the same way.
The other job related thing that is kind of near and dear to our heart, as I'm seeing the outline, it's really dark outside because it's cloudy, but I can see, yep, in the light, branches flying around.
Yep.
Because the wind is, probably about 20 miles an hour out there right now. Lineman sounding staffing alarm bell. Rallying on the steps, and this is also by Christine Stewart. Rallying on the steps of the state of Capitol Monday, Connecticut Light and Power line workers called on the utility company to increase its staffing levels, and they found no shortage of support among the state's elected officials. The rally, organized by two International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers locals, comes as the unions are in the midst of negotiations with the company over contracts which expired in June.
Yikes.
Yeah. The number of train line workers, a number that has dropped over the years, has long been a point of contention for the unions. But the issue became a prominent one last year after severe storms twice left much of the state without electricity for over a week. Following the storm, CLMP relied heavily on out-of-state work crews, some of whom were slow to arrive in Connecticut. The unions allege that the company allowed its in-house staffing levels to dwindle in an effort to increase profits. It's not really an argument that's hard to make, by the by, because the Hartford Courant ran a series of articles that showed that the number of line workers in 2007 to 2008 was down by about 10%.
Okay.
2008 to 2009, down by about 10%. 2009 to 2000, and the profits went up correspondingly each year.
Interesting.
Okay. In fact, that was one of the reasons why the then president, Butler, was being touted as this wonderkind for the electric company because he was showing how CLMP was making all these wonderful profits.
Makes sense.
They weren't paying people as much. That's why.
Or at all.
Right. It's an issue they've raised again after Tropical Storm Irene last year, and after falling on deaf ears, the issue seems to have gained more political support. John Fernandez, assistant business manager of the IBEW Local 457, said in 1976 there was roughly one line worker for 2,000 utility customers. Today, it's one for every 9,120 customers.
Can I get that again?
One lineman for roughly 2,000 customers.
So 4.5 times that now.
Yep.
Okay.
And I'm going to skip through some of the quotes, frankly, because it's basically beating a dead horse. We know that there is an issue here. Okay? One of the things that was said, however, is, I've never heard something more ridiculous in my life, Cirillo said before the rally. As late as 2005, the utility had 24-hour-a-day coverage, but the company put an end to it because it no longer had enough people. Oops. Now, the utilities were touting to the then PUC, now it's the DPUC, how able they were to respond to emergencies. Doesn't sound like they're in a position to be able to respond all that well.
It was just on a much smaller scale.
If only a quarter of the state's out, we got it covered. It's not a problem.
We're fine. When something cuts a swath through the state of Connecticut, well, then we're kind of screwed.
Pay no attention to the man with the arc. Okay, we're down another lineman. Sorry. The thing is, that speaks to our infrastructure. And if you don't have the electric lines and you have bridges possibly falling down, because yes, the Department of Transportation has yet again rated several of our bridges as being the grade slightly above about to collapse.
Yeah.
And some of them are on state highways, like, for instance, Route 5,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the interstates.
Right.
Okay, the interstates have most of their bridges at the next grade up, which is needs some work, but it's not about to fall down.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not dealing with the Mianus River Bridge situation
Yet.
like we did way back when. Well, back then, there were actually several bridges that were slightly better rated than the Mianus River Bridge was.
Wow.
That one fell.
Yeah.
That's not the case now. Okay, 95 is not about to have an imminent collapse. 84 is not about to have an imminent collapse. But for instance, if you were to drive on 185,
Mm-hmm.
there's a bridge over the Farmington River that they finally, after many years, got to repainting. It looks better. Then they repaved. Okay, much better. Then there's Route 66, the Aragoni Bridge,
Yep.
crossing the Connecticut River. They just redid the plating. Okay, and they paved over it. That was after they had painted. It seems like they paint first and then worry about the deck next.
That's been going on. That work has been going on for, I'm going to say, 14 years. How's this? I used to coach out in East Hampton,
Mhm.
so I had to go over that bridge all the time.
Yep.
And there was work going on back, oh my God, early 2000s when I was coaching. So easily that far back. Easily that far back.
I will give the DOT a nice little shout out. They finished that bridge almost.
Yeah.
Okay. They're no longer cutting it down to 2 lanes just to do what they need to do. It's 1 lane maybe at night.
Yep.
At this point in time, they were expected to keep going through October. They're actually done. They were done on August 27th.
Oh, that's good.
Okay, so kudos to the DOT for getting on top of things before the contract called for. Love it. But frankly, we still got a lot of work to do as far as the infrastructure in our state is concerned, whether it's lines, whether it's roads, whether it's rail. Okay? And yeah, federal money is involved, and we have to contend with that, and we have to jump through some hoops for that. But we're not doing enough fast enough. And it's beginning to show. For instance, the work that they're doing on 84 right now in Hartford.
Yep.
On the Route 2 84 interchange and the 84 91 interchange.
Yep.
Has been crazy the last 5-6 weeks.
Yep.
And who thought that it was a good idea to shut down 2 lanes of a 4-lane highway, actually 2 lanes of an 8-lane highway where 4 are going in one direction? I was coming back from Fenway last Thursday night. Okay. It was bad on Route 90.
Yeah.
That would be the Mass Pike.
Right.
Okay. They shut down 3 lanes out of 4. And it took an hour to go 8 miles. I was driving an average of 8 miles an hour on the highway.
Portsmouth, New Hampshire. How far away is that?
That depends on who's driving.
How about this? 120 miles? 130 miles?
Thereabouts, yes.
It took us 4 hours to get back.
The worst thing was, though, after we got through that, and we're now in Connecticut, we're on 84. I'm thinking, at least I know I'm only 45 minutes away. No. Between exit 72 and 69,
yep,
they were doing the same damn thing. 3 lanes shut down. And this wasn't something, the guy I was with was looking at the pavement and saying, wait a minute, there's no cracks. There's no holes. This is still good for at least another 5 years. What the hell are they doing? Anyways, not that kind of infrastructure work, folks. Please. But some of the basic 2-lane, 4-lane state highways, Manischewitz, it needs some work. Anyways, all of this is driving what will likely happen in the local elections. If the local roads aren't getting paved, the local representative is likely going to hear about it. The local senator, the state senator, is likely going to hear about it. And I'm not foreseeing some of this stuff being done in time for November 6th.
No.
Just saying.
God, no.
We're going to do a little bit of bill paying, and then we'll be back. But because there's a race that's happening in Windsor that you won't believe. It's amazing what they're having to go through. We'll be right back.
We could have had actual DJs.
You'll get a kick out of this one.
Instead, we got these guys.
47% of people on the radio don't wear pants. It's a fact.
It's a work in progress. OnTheHorn.com.
Budwitz & Meyerjack PC is a large Connecticut-based CPA firm with offices in Cheshire and Farmington, Connecticut. Large enough to handle engagements of enterprises with annual revenues in excess of $100 million, yet small enough to cater to smaller businesses and individual clients who expect personalized attention from partners and staff. Client service is the cornerstone of our practice. Our clients have a fixed fee for their audit and tax work. What this means to the client is we're approachable. Personal communication and client services make for strong relationships. Budwitz & Meyerjack, certified public accountants.
Sandits Travel for business and leisure. We'll take you there. Sandits Travel has been proudly serving Connecticut since 1960. That's over 50 years. And we're ready for another 50 years of superior service. Whether you prefer to come in, call in, or log on, we invite you to explore how efficient, diverse, and fun it is to book through Sandits Travel. Save your money and your time with us. Sandits Travel. We'll take you there.
I'll tell you, with some of the ads that are on TV, I want to book with Sandits. I want to get the hell out of here because it's crazy.
Where are you going? I don't care. Just get me out of here.
Yeah, I don't care. Pittsburgh sounds good. I might catch a baseball game. Now the folks in Windsor are having a lot of fun. It's the primary that is not dead yet.
Won't go away.
Yeah, the candidates seeking the Democratic nomination in the 5th Assembly District are back to being tied Monday after a recount of all 3 polling places in Windsor. Judge A. Susan Peck ordered the unprecedented second recount of the Windsor polling places and the Hartford absentee ballots on Friday. Hartford will count the absentee ballots at 2 p.m. today. So maybe it's over? No, because I think that I did see a story about how in Windsor they found one more absentee ballot.
Just one more.
Hadn't been opened yet.
Just one more.
Yeah. The race was moved back to a tie on Monday when election officials in Windsor found, that's what we're talking about. The alleged missing ballot for Brandon McGee stuck to another ballot in the stack. Really? Wow. There were also 3 absentee ballots cast for which election officials failed to cross off the name of the voter on the master list. Those votes were counted, but it's still unclear how the judge will handle them since it's a violation of election regulations. It's possible that those votes could be thrown out. There is also 1 uncounted sealed ballot, no, that's the one I was talking about, in Windsor from a voter who died between the time that they voted and the August 14th primary. That vote hasn't been counted. There are lurking questions, candidate Leo Canty said. If we had taken my advice and all agreed to a revote, this wouldn't be necessary. McGee, a political newcomer who is making his first run for office, filed a lawsuit after the first recount certified Canty as the winner by a single vote. McGee's attorney, William Sweeney, argued that in the lawsuit that there was a ballot missing in Windsor for his client because the tabulator counted 526 votes, but there were only 525 ballots. Ooh, we found it.
How many times can they count these?
Once it's in the judge's hands,
Yeah.
it's up to the judge.
Okay.
The judge ordered a second recount. That should be it.
Right.
Okay. We shall see.
I just wonder because they've got an election to try and win.
Yeah.
One of them
I mean,
has
one of
an
them's
election
got
they're
some
gonna try and
signs that he needs to take down, and
there's
one of them's
things you've
got some
gotta do.
signs to put back up. Do an internet search for items that contain petroleum, and you'll come across a list which includes hundreds of regular household items from cosmetics to appliances. But just because they contain petroleum doesn't mean the state of Connecticut can tax them. That question was raised by Senator Kevin Witkos, who, it was pointed out to him, realized that things like lipstick have petroleum jelly.
Mm-hmm.
And certain spirits, and we're not talking about the drinking kind,
Damn it.
have petroleum products in them. So he then went on the radio to talk about how the gross receipts tax might actually apply.
See,
One
this is,
small problem.
this is one of those things. Why? Why?
Because he wants to talk about how we're really overtaxing things in Connecticut and that we really should be taxing much less. There's a small problem with that, Senator. If you take out the revenue, you don't have the ability to spend, or else you're in deficit spending, which is something that the state has been doing for decades.
For a while.
And we've just come from a $1.8 billion deficit down to a $148 million deficit. Wow, that's $1 billion in spending deficit that's gone bye-bye.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because we also dealt with the largest tax increase in the history of the state of Connecticut. Well, apparently the question was asked Senator Witkos at a Chamber of Commerce meeting, and I know that it was the Avon Chamber of Commerce, last week. He didn't know the answer off the top of his head, so he called the Senate Republican research team and asked them to find out whether the gross receipt tax applies to other things that contain petroleum, like petroleum jelly.
Vaseline intensive care.
They concluded that the law was not clear, and it's possible that items such as lipstick might fall under the tax. There was one small problem. They didn't ask the folks who run the tax department. And Commissioner Kevin Sullivan immediately came on the air and said, yeah, no, we don't tax all petroleum products. We're just talking about fuel,
Gasoline.
oil, kerosene, you know, the stuff that burns.
That burns.
Yeah. None of the consumer products that you discussed, insect repellent, oh, well, that does burn too if you put a flame to it. Trash
does.
bags, tires, clothes, CDs, deodorant, rubbing alcohol, and more have ever been subject to this tax under the state law adopted by the state legislature, Sullivan wrote Witkos in a letter. It's not a partisan thing, Witkos said. I was just trying to be responsive to a constituent. Then why don't you go to the source? Just saying. Speaking of going to the source, apparently there was a decision by the World Wrestling Entertainment folks to take down some of their edgier content.
Mm-hmm.
By edgier, we mean stuff from the early 1980s through the early 1990s. Stuff where you had scantily clad women who were throwing each other around or throwing chairs at one another. You had scantily clad women with men that were on all fours in the wrestling ring. Not exactly something that you wanted little Billy to see or Susie to want to ask questions about. Well, apparently the Democratic Party in the state of Connecticut didn't think that that was right. So they proceeded to find some archival stuff and put them back up on YouTube. Apparently the WWE didn't like that and contacted YouTube saying the next letter will be a cease and desist letter. You need to take the stuff down. So YouTube complied. Question. Is this going to continue until November? At least November 6th?
I would say yes.
Answer, yes.
100%.
Because that's one thing that the Democratic Party doesn't want Linda McMahon to get away from. At least not that much. Now, another thing that Linda McMahon is trying to get away from is a comment that was made by the Republican presidential contender, talking about how 47% of the electorate don't pay taxes and are on some form of government program or another, and that as a result, they won't be in favor of cutting entitlements and they won't care about taxes being cut because it doesn't affect them.
Doesn't apply.
And he therefore was not going to try to reach out to them. I think that that was the one thing that was sparking a response. It wasn't so much that 47% were going to vote for President Obama regardless because of the fact that they didn't care about tax cuts or that they were on an entitlement program. It's the fact that the Republican candidate wasn't even going to try to convince them to vote for him.
I'm guessing he knows the truth. You're going to speak to some people. Now I'm just trying to wander through his brain here. You're never ever gonna get some people to side with you. So why bother?
I don't hear an echo.
So
Sorry.
why bother? Oh, there would be. You actually need the God button for this. Why bother? Why waste your money? Why waste campaign time? Why waste anything on people that you know you're never going to sway?
It does explain why the Romney campaign pulled back $178 million in campaign ads for certain states.
Makes a lot of sense.
Wisconsin was one of them, although they've
Really?
now changed their mind about that again.
Huh.
Yeah. Wisconsin, the same state that was talking about possibly recalling its governor.
Right.
And then the governor actually survived that by a 2% margin, which, given the amount of money that was flowing into that state from both sides,
Yeah.
is pretty interesting. But in our own fair state, Republican U.S. Senate candidate Linda McMahon was quick to distance herself from Mitt Romney's remarks regarding the 47% of Americans who pay no taxes, while her opponent accuses her of making similar remarks last September when she launched her 2012 campaign. This is also from ctnewsjunkie.com. In response to WTNH reporter Mark Davis's question about, who, by the way, is a very good political reporter,
Sure.
about whether the wealthy should pay more in taxes, McMahon replied, "I'd like to see everyone pay their fair share. 47% of the people today don't pay any taxes, so let's have a fair code where everyone pays their taxes." That probably wasn't the best thing for a candidate of any persuasion to say in a tight election race.
No.
But McMahon's remarks don't include value judgments about the 47% that Romney includes in his remarks at a closed-door fundraiser in Florida. That fundraiser, by the way, was back in May, before he was the nominee.
Right.
That video, uploaded by Mother Jones, shows Romney telling wealthy donors that there are 47% of American people who will vote for the president no matter what. Those 47%, Romney said, pay no income taxes and are dependent upon government. He described them as victims who believe that the government has a responsibility to care for them. The remarks prompted McMahon's campaign to put out a statement distancing herself from Romney's comments. "I disagree with Governor Romney's insinuation that 47% of Americans believe they are victims who must depend upon the government for their care." This is something that she actually wrote on her Facebook at about 10:30 a.m. "I know that the vast majority of those who rely on government are not in that situation because they want to be." This actually is playing well within the parameters of how she has tried to redefine herself as being sympathetic and to a certain degree empathetic. She goes on to talk about how she and her husband had lost their house, which was tough for
Filed
her,
for bankruptcy.
tough for her 2 young kids, and that she had been in the shoes of many of the people who Romney was talking about. The unfortunate thing is the Murphy campaign is very quick to point out, okay, yeah, but what about now? And by the way, you never paid back the folks that you stiffed in the bankruptcy either. At least Murphy paid the people that he owed. Not sure that that's gaining a whole lot of traction either, folks.
By the way, did you say Mother Jones?
Mother Jones.
I haven't heard that name in 12, 14 years again. That's
David Korn, who is their political correspondent,
yeah.
who is frequently on MSNBC,
Yeah.
either with Lawrence O'Donnell or with Rachel Maddow, is the guy who broke this. Okay?
My former roommates back when I was attending CCSU were hippies. I guess that's the easiest way to say it. And there was always some of that floating around the house. That's amazing. I haven't heard that name in years.
Now, one of the things that the Murphy campaign points out is that while she tries to distance herself from the candidate's statements, she ain't distancing herself from the candidate himself. In fact, there is a contribution that she and her husband Vince made to Romney's Restore Our Future PAC, $150,000 worth.
I would do some looking into this, because I know that if this is something from the business, usually because they do the whole like rock the vote type thing,
right?
There are contributions made to both sides, so I will defend them. I will defend the business on this one. I do know they make contributions to both.
According to this story, it's Vincent and Linda making the contribution.
Okay.
Not the biz.
Okay.
And McMahon's spokesman said, no, Linda will not be asking for the money back. UConn political science professor Vincent Moscardelli said last week that as a Republican running in a liberal-leaning state, McMahon this year has tried to make the race about 2 individuals rather than 2 political parties. But Murphy's campaign wants Connecticut voters to think of McMahon as a Romney surrogate. The fact is, the leader of her party is caught speaking honestly about the real McMahon-Romney agenda that would give Linda an additional $7 million tax break, Murphy's campaign spokesman Zupnik said. Just like Romney McMahon has a long disturbing history of laying off 10% of her workforce while taking $10 million in taxpayer money, as well as a plan to give millionaires like her a massive tax cut at the expense of middle-class families. The problem with that statement is there's some truth to it, and some not so accurate statements.
As with most things political.
There is a history of her laying people off. There is a history of her taking money, whether it's from the government or claiming a profit after laying these people off. It's not so true whether or not she would be getting $7 million back if the Bush tax cuts were extended another year.
Okay.
It's also not clear that if the Bush tax cuts were extended, that the middle class would be paying $2,000 more. That's more if they don't get extended. Then we go back to the Clintonian rates, and that nobody would be happy with. So there is yet more fun and games in the Connecticut Senate race. There is more fun and games overall in politics. And we know, aside from the unrest in the Middle East, that foreign policy is not really going to be driving this bus. It's going to be the economy. And it's fairly clear that Connecticut's economy isn't in the recovery stage yet. It's not hemorrhaging, but it's not in the recovery stage yet. And I guarantee in 50 days, that's going to make the difference on November 6th.
Agreed.
Well, it's been fun. It's been real. It's been real fun for us. Hopefully, it's been real fun for you. You've been
listening. Drive home.
Yeah, really. You've been listening to News Talk Tonight. I'm Dave Moore, your host, with Brian Lee, my guest. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. We've been brought to you by Amazon.com, Gateway Financial Group, Sandits Travel, Sherpa Technologies, Budwitz and Meyer Jack CPAs, Deepwater Seafood of Avon, and CentralCTDental.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Fresh, organic, and homegrown. On the Horn.